Welcome back to another video. As you know, I do these videos for my son, primarily. A repository for him if something happens to me. Otherwise, I hope my videos get out and help those who would consider themselves Stoics or Christians or men who have come across the red pill. And when I say red pill, sometimes I'm referring to a particular community on Reddit which focuses on men's sexual strategy. But not today. Today I'm talking about the conspiratorial red pill, the political red pill, the red pill of the coming forth from the illusion of the matrix you've been living in, and how sometimes it's hard. Some people want to stay blue-pilled about a lot of things. This video is going to focus specifically on the review of a book that I just recently read called Revolution Q by Neon Revolt. Neon Revolt is obviously not the dude's real name. He is a Anon, as he calls himself, which is how anyone will refer to themselves on the various image boards that are out there, like 4chan or 8chan. So Neon Revolt is one of the most famous or infamous Anons who follows Q, and one of them who has done a really good job at dissecting everything that Q has posted. So before I go into who Q is, Neon Revolt has been kicked off Twitter for what he's posted, probably because he's getting too close to the truth. And he has written a book. The book is super long. It's the book I'm reviewing right now, Revolution Q. It's an amazing read, though, and I honestly would advise you to read it regardless of what you feel about the political spectrum, like whether you're on the left or the right. If you're on the right, you'll want to read it. It's going to just be super interesting, and you're going to be like, and you're just going to nod your head along the whole way. But if you're on the left, you could at least read this so you can know what the Q movement is all about, and at least know your opposing team very, very well. If you really want to have good arguments against the right, you'd want to read this so you at least know what people on the right are getting into these days, because the Q movement is getting very, very big. Neon Revolt was kicked off Twitter. He wrote a book called Revolution Q. You can actually find him on Gab. He actually also has a website, but honestly, his website, I'm going to be real, I don't think it's that great, and it's a blog, but he doesn't post very often. So, even Q is posting more than he is these days, which just makes it not so interesting for me. I'm going to just be real about it. If you want to go to see Q's posts, just go to qmap.pub, and you'll see everything that Q does, and he's posting daily these days. He used to post every few months, every few weeks, now he's posting every day. But let's keep it on topic to the review of this particular book. So the book starts off explaining the boards. So 4chan.org, 8chan are image boards, and they seem weird when you go there. Like, these are kind of weirdos that are on this site. Like, sometimes you'll see like neo-Nazis, or you'll see like people who love certain types of cartoons, adult cartoons, let's say. There's all sorts of weird topics that people talk about on these image boards, but they're actually being used by high-level intelligence and military and government people on both sides. This book is crazy. It actually will give you an example of a time where one of the high-level Rothschilds came onto the image board to talk, like super nuts kind of stuff. Donald Trump himself has posted on these image boards, and he has proven that it's him. The book goes into that. But the book starts off explaining what the boards are and how insane they really are. And if you don't know about the boards, you're missing out on a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes right now. So you will read all about the boards and a little bit of an intro about Q. At a certain point, one of the chapters or two chapters goes into a very big biography on Neon Revolt and who he is. It does kind of take away from the excitement of the book a little bit, but it's building up credibility for him. So that was the one part of the book that I was like not so into, but it actually is good to read nonetheless, and it is helpful. The one thing I want to tell you guys about this book is that it probably goes into detail on just about every conspiracy theory you've ever heard. Like, seriously. Like, he talks about Bob Lazar and Area 51, or otherwise known as S4. He talks about the Masons, the Jesuits, the Illuminati, the Egyptians, the Babylonian, satanic cabals. He goes into how, like, for example, all the arches that we see, like the Arc de Triomphe in Paris and some of the arches in DC are really gates to, like, spiritual realms and symbols for Satan and crazy stuff. The book is definitely going to open your eyes to a few things that I knew and had heard of, and a few things I had not heard of. And I had like, oh shit moments when I read this book. And I'm just gonna kind of tease it out a little bit. Have you ever looked at a former president's kids? Are they his kids? When you really look at it, I don't think so. And the book explains it way more. I'm also going to tease a little bit something here. Do you remember a particular senator who died in the last 10 years? And let's just say he might not have died the same way the media told you he died. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't want to give it away. I don't want to start telling you what's in this book. I want you guys to go get this book and read it. But let's take some passages that I saved here. Let's talk about Bob Lazar real quick. Here's a passage. I stumbled across the testimonies of Bob Lazar, a man who claimed to work at a satellite facility near Area 51 named S4, where he was tasked with reverse engineering alien craft that had supposedly found their way into the hands of the U.S. government, and where he all but claims to have taken a sample of a stable isotope of something called element 115. The crazy thing is, Bill Cooper was on the fence about Lazar, at one point willing to hear him out, and at another point labeling him a CIA-affiliated disinfo agent, which is to say that Cooper wasn't much help on the subject of Lazar's trustworthiness. One thing I will say is that Lazar's testimony has remained remarkably consistent over the years, and he has never attempted to monetize his story in the way of some others have during the intervening 30-odd years since. At any rate, Area 51 didn't exist in the public consciousness until Bob came out with his testimony. Bob Lazar put Area 51 on the map, so to speak. And I am glad that Neon Revolt wrote about Bob, because I actually mentioned Bob in a previous video. And if you go back into my channel, maybe a week or so ago, I did a UFO video because the Pentagon just declassified all the vehicles that, or at least the evidence of the vehicles that Bob Lazar was talking about. They kinda, what's that word? Man, I forget the word. They basically validated what he was saying. Here's another highlight from this book, just so you know what kind of conspiracies he's talking about. He talks about everything, and I mentioned a few, but I didn't talk about the bankers. Y'all know I know you guys know about the banks. Like, there's tons of documentaries, and he goes into super detail about who the banks are controlled by and how bad the Federal Reserve is. Hint, hint, there's nothing federal about it. Here is a quote from that part of the book. When a government is dependent upon bankers for money, they and not the leaders of the government control the situation. Since the hand that gives is above the hand that takes, money has no motherland, financiers are without patriotism and without decency. Their sole object is gain. I can think of a few people off the top of my head who are definitely fitting that description of a financier, guys. I think I will actually go ahead and give you guys one final quote here. This video is approaching 10 minutes. Absolutely great book. I highly recommend you pick it up. Here's a quote. But to further demonstrate the power of this bloodline, you must know that the House of Windsor comes straight from this bloodline, and that 34 U.S. presidents are all genetic descendants of Charlemagne himself. 19 presidents are directly descended from King Edward III of England. When George Bush ran against John Kerry in 2004, he was running against his 16th cousin. Skull and bones, anyone? I wasn't joking when I recited the quote earlier. It's a big club and you ain't in it. End quote. And I had not heard that, Charlemagne was the actual, like the father of all these world leaders. That I had never really thought of, to be totally fair. Kind of crazy. I mean, it was a really long time ago. I'm sure he had tons of kids and spread his seed throughout the world, but it's pretty crazy if they're all aware of their relation to Charlemagne. Anyway, let's wrap it up. That is a small taste of Revolution Q by Neuron Revolt. Remember, Q, guys, we didn't talk much about, is highly covered in this book. A lot of his posts are dissected. Go to qmap.pub if you want to see all of it. Like, it is probably the best repository for all things Q, including all his posts up to date, their links, and a bunch of other good information on the left part of the webpage. I don't know if you guys will buy into Q or not. I know a lot of people on the right are super big fans. If you go onto Twitter and you just type in the hashtag WWG1WGA, but at the same time, a lot of people on the right are also fed up and think that Q is a bullshit operation and that he's just lying to make people excited, because he does say things like, this is going to be a justice week, this is going to be a boom week, and it's like, okay, but nothing ever happens. So take it for what you will, but the book definitely talks about all sorts of conspiracies, and it also talks about Q and dissects just about every one of his significant posts. But he has, I think, 5,000 posts now, so just the really important ones. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. If you've read the book, if you think Q is a LARP, if you think Q is real. You also might want to figure out who Q Plus is. That's a little easier. And yeah, questions, comments, put them in the area below. And you guys are good. Have a good one.